Have you ever felt so exhausted, so mentally drained that even the simplest tasks feel impossible? Like you're stuck in a fog you just can't shake? If you have ADHD, you're not just tired, you might be burned out. And it's not just about being busy or having a lot on your plate, it's about being overwhelmed, overstimulated, and stretched way too thin. But here's the good news: you can stop ADHD burnout in its tracks. Today, I'm about to show you how to spot it, recover from it, and keep it from coming back. Let's dive in. Hi, my name is Jen Barnes. I hold a master's degree in social work, have worked in the field of mental health for 25 years, and now I'm an ADHD success coach. I help ADHD women find strategies that actually work for their unique brains. Burnout hits differently for ADHDers, and I'm about to break down how to break free from that cycle. If you're ready to feel more energized and in control, stick around. So, what does ADHD burnout look like? It can be tricky because it can sneak up on you. Here are 5 signs to watch for. One is mental exhaustion. You feel mentally drained, like your brain is running on empty, and your focus is out the window, making everything be a struggle and take way longer because you're more distractible. You might have physical fatigue, like you're tired even after resting. Your body feels heavy and sluggish. You might feel emotional overwhelm, like little things set you off, and you may notice irritation, sadness, anger, or even numbness. You might also experience task paralysis, where even simple tasks feel impossible and you just can't get yourself to start. And then you might go through a hyperfocus crash. So you go through these intense periods of focus and then crash after for hours, maybe even days. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Burnout happens when you're pushing past your capacity for too long and not doing anything to complete the stress response. But don't worry, there are ways to recover. Recovering from burnout with ADHD means being intentional about rest and resetting your nervous system. Before we get into how to recover, it's important to understand that when you are truly in burnout, the only way to recover is doing nothing. Brene Brown, in her book Atlas of the Heart and in her podcast talking about that book, shares the story of working in a restaurant. And when they would get stressed in the restaurant, they would come back into the kitchen and say, "I'm in the weeds." And that would tell their coworkers that they just needed extra help. So a lot of times with ADHD, we can feel like we're in the weeds. We're still able to do stuff, but we just feel a little bit stuck. But a little bit of extra support could help us be able to do the stuff we need to. But back to Brene's story, when they would come back into the kitchen and say, "I'm blown," that meant that they were overwhelmed, or essentially in that moment, burned out. And because of the impact that has on the brain, someone would take their server pad and go to the hostess desk, make sure that they were clear on the tables she was covering, and then actually do the work. While meanwhile, that person who was blown would leave the kitchen. They would not be allowed to be in the building except in the freezer, which maybe is attractive in Houston, definitely not in Minnesota, unless it's the dead of summer. But they would go and have to be away for a minimum of 10 minutes. Her boss at the time, while maybe not a neuroscience expert, understood that when you're blown, when you're overwhelmed, not just stressed, but truly overwhelmed and burned out, the only thing that will help you come back is doing nothing. That's why when you do those hyper focuses and then you crash and can't do anything, that's what's happening. Your body is like, nope. So when you're burned out, it could be only 10 minutes that you need to do nothing, like in Brene's example, where it's much more of an overwhelmed situation. But if it's true burnout, it could be hours, days, weeks, even months of doing nothing, depending on how long you pushed past your limits. Keep this in mind as we explore 5 ways to recover from ADHD burnout. Number 1, when you're burned out, you must prioritize rest. This isn't just sleep and physical rest. It's mental rest, sensory rest, emotional rest, social rest, and even spiritual and creative rest. During this time, you need to reduce stimulation, take quiet breaks, and limit decision making where possible. And if you're thinking, when could I do all this, Jen? Consider things like while you're driving, turning your radio off, maybe taking some time with yourself to journal or to just be doing nothing. Or perhaps doing something creative, and it doesn't have to be art, or it could be art, and you don't have to be an official artist. Maybe even connecting with your spirituality in some way. Number two, nourish your body. With ADHD, it's easy to forget to eat, especially when we're in a hyperfocus. If you are in a place of burnout, it is essential that you're eating regular, nutrient dense meals or snacks, however you do it. Set an alarm if you have to so that you remember. And then hydrate. Also, include gentle movement. Things like stretching or walking can help release tension. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later when we talk about burnout prevention. But movement is essential. Simplify your to do list. So, I have been teetering on the edge of burnout today. And what I've done is I've cut down my to do list to a bare minimum, focusing on only what is essential. So, for you, when you look at each task on that list, ask yourself, does this have to be done now? Does it have to be done by you? And for me, it was asking, does this task have to be done now in the next 2 weeks before I go on a vacation? And does it have to be done by me? And then I took those things off my plate to help me prevent burnout or even recover a little bit from the burnout I was experiencing. Practice mindfulness and grounding. You can try simple breathing exercises or grounding techniques. This helps calm your nervous system. Though often I find it helpful to do the calmness mudra first if you're feeling amped up and being told to practice breathing exercises aggravates you. The calmness mudra is just lifting your hands up like goalposts and shaking your hands back and forth. And then from there, that burns off some of that adrenaline and leaves space for you to be able to embrace a breathing practice. Make sure you're also seeking support. Even though the urge is strong to isolate, don't do it. Reach out to supportive friends, ADHD groups, a therapist or coach who understands ADHD. And remember, recovery isn't instant, it's a process, but every small step you take counts. So now the question is, once you've recovered from burnout, or to prevent it if you're teetering on the edge, how do you stop it? The key to preventing burnout is in building sustainable habits that respect your brain's capacity. The most important thing to do is to complete the stress response every day. This is because biochemicals from the fight or flight response build up in your body if you don't use them to fight or flee. And oftentimes, when we're under chronic stress, we can find ourselves vacillating between the fight and flight and shutdown response, right? The hyper focused on edge and the shutting down, numbing out, crashing stage. And what that does is it builds up these chemicals like adrenaline, noradrenaline, also known as norepinephrine, or cortisol. And when that buildup happens, you are more likely to get sick. You are more likely to feel the symptoms of burnout that we talked about. And long term can result in other problems like chronic illness. So, how do we do this? How do we release these biochemicals from the body every day? Well, since these biochemicals are meant to help you fight or flee, things that involve movement, the most effective way to complete the stress response, to move these chemicals through the body, is to be at least is to do at least 30 minutes of movement daily. This can be broken up throughout your day, like little walks here and there, or done in one fell swoop. It's up to you. You can also do something creative or connect with a loved one, or even have a big cry or a deep belly laugh. Equally important is to pace yourself. Avoid the all or nothing cycle that's so common with ADHD. Break tasks into smaller steps, maybe even micro steps, and schedule regular breaks. To do this, you must know your limits, pay attention to your energy levels, and set realistic expectations. A piece of this is getting clear on where your energy is at in a given day and how much capacity you have. Sometimes you have a high capacity for doing stuff, sometimes it's really low, or perhaps in the middle. The clearer you are on that, the better you're going to be able to plan for those days and honor where you're at. And yes, it's essential to create routines. And I get it. Routine is like the longest four-letter word for ADHD. Most ADHDers I know have a love hate relationship with routines. And yet, ADHD friendly routines can reduce decision fatigue and keep you grounded. Also, here's the thing, boundaries matter. ADHDers have a tough time saying no due to our time blindness and tendencies towards people pleasing and attempts to avoid criticism and or people being mad at us. Not to mention our struggles with our own internal boundaries with things like resisting shiny object syndrome, which for me looks like new tech tools or new programs we agree to create for people. This is why it is essential to learn to say no to others and to yourself. Protect your time and energy from unnecessary commitments in order to prevent burnout. Always check what's on your plate before you agree to something, whether that agreement is to others or to your own self. And last but not least, celebrate small wins. Recognize your progress, even the tiny steps. This builds motivation and resilience. I do this with my daily win journal, writing down at least three things, no matter how small, that I accomplished that day. Something that I find not only helpful for motivation and resilience, but also in avoiding shame around those less productive days, among other things. Burnout is tough, but it doesn't have to control your life. You have the power to recognize it, recover from it, and prevent it. If you found this video helpful, remember to like it, comment, and subscribe for more ADHD strategies. And let me know in the comments, what is your go-to burnout recovery ritual? You've got this. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.